Okay.
Hello, this is Karen Harrison. Welcome to October Reiki Call. My website is www.karenharrison.net, and my Facebook page is Whole Life Center. My YouTube is Karen Harrison Reiki, and my guest tonight is Pam Allen LeBlanc from Canada, and she is an expert on animals. She's also one of our licensed Reiki Master teachers, and she co-authored the Animal Reiki class and teaches Animal Reiki online. So Pam, can you tell us what is your website and how can people contact you?
Oh, absolutely, Karen. Thank you. My website is www.hiddenbrook.ca. And also, we have a website, the same website for our podcast, which is Reiki from the Farm. And so that's reikifromthefarm.com. And you can reach me also by email at pam@hiddenbrook.ca.
Wonderful. So I'd like to get started by just asking you a little bit about how long have you been talking to the animals? And I guess I just have to confess that I've been singing the song from, the musical all day. If I could talk to the animals, think what fun it'd be. All right, I know, keep my day job, but it's like, but we can talk to the animals. Might be harder
We
to
can.
listen.
And,
That's the thing.
that's exactly what I was going to say. I've been talking to them forever, but I couldn't hear what they were saying back, unless it was physical, like horses that would knock me into a pile of horse manure or into a mud puddle or something. I really couldn't hear what they were telling me. And so I guess for that reason, I'm not a natural animal communicator. And I remember when I met an animal communicator. I'm a scientist. I have an animal science background and a business background as well. And so just very logical. And I wasn't sure if animal communication was real, but I had this horse that I couldn't get through to. She had come from a lot of trauma and a really difficult past. And I usually could get through to horses. She was the first one that I struggled with, and actually it's her eye that you can see behind me right there. And I didn't know what to do to help her because she broke my ribs, she broke my nose, and it was not intentional. If it had been intentional, I don't know, but she was so frightened all of the time. And I really wanted to help this horse. So I hired an animal communicator, and I watched what she did, and I could see that the body language of the horses would corroborate what she was then, but she had her eyes closed, so she wasn't even looking at their body language. And then she'd turn around and tell me what the horses had said, and I was watching their body language back it up. And that's body language is science. I could get behind that. But I was at my wit's end as to what to do for her. So I thought, what could it hurt? And I brought out the animal communicator, and then I watched their body language, and it was matching what she would turn around and say, but she got so much more detail and so much more information than what I could get from their body language. And that was in 2009, I believe it was. And I said, oh, that's a fantastic skill. I'm going to learn that. I'm going to, and I applied myself, and I purchased courses, and I really worked hard at it, and I got nothing. I could not hear anything at all. So everybody says, you just have to quiet your mind. And I call bull on that, because I could quiet my mind and I still couldn't hear anything. And at least I had the understanding that they always understand us. They understand the even nuances that we may not understand, that we're communicating, but I really could not hear anything back. And so it's the listening that I had to figure out. And I was really fortunate, Karen. I went to this wonderful clinic around Linda Kohanov's groundbreaking work. And I am going to talk a lot about horses here just because that's what got me started, but it applies to every animal. And I've learned to appreciate and just get to know so many different breeds and species of animals. But her book is called The Tao of Equus, and it really challenged the way I've worked with horses.
Can you say that one more time? The Tao Equus?
The Tao of Equus, T-A-O of Equus. And the author's name is Linda Kohanov. It's a pretty dense book, actually. But for somebody like me who worked with horses all my life, she really challenged our traditional way of doing things and our traditional beliefs. And I was really drawn to it. So when I had an opportunity to attend a clinic on this work, and it wasn't given by her, it was given by a student of hers. And when I had an opportunity to attend the clinic, the first thing they said was, okay, now we're going to go out and listen to the animals. And I thought, oh, drat. I was so embarrassed. I thought I was the only horse person in the clinic. And I thought, this is so embarrassing. I can't do that. So I stayed behind, and everybody else trotted out into the stalls to talk to their horses and get the information that they needed. And I stayed behind and talked to the clinician's mom who was assisting her. And I said, Marilyn, I can't do that. And I said, I can't do this exercise. And she said something that was really surprising to me and maybe will be helpful to some of you. She said, oh, and I said, I've been trying for 2 years and I can't hear anything. And she said, well, nobody can hear their own animals, Pam. They're too emotionally involved with them. Why don't you go out and see if you can hear ours? And then using the techniques that they had given us for that exercise, it was like somebody flipped a switch and I was able to go out and able to receive. But the thing is, Karen, it doesn't come through your mind like you might think. It's heart-centered. The communication comes through the heart. So I had to learn how to open my heart to the animals in a way, and my heart's always been open to animals. I've always loved them, but open it in a slightly different way that allowed for that two-way telepathic communication. And then you have to learn not to be too not to expect it to sound like a conversation, because depending on how you experience your intuition is how you're going to receive the information. And for me, it's feelings. So I would get a lot of feelings from the animal, but I just thought I made them up. And so then eventually they started, the connection grew and I was able to start adding pictures. And so a feeling in a picture. And that's just because that's how I experience my intuition. And so then I learned to be able to put together the feeling with the picture and interpret. And then I learned how to dowse. And some of you probably dowse with a pendulum, and I learned to dowse with L rods and verify my work, just check, did I understand that right or not? And sometimes I did understand it right, and sometimes I got part of it, but not quite the whole thing. And so it's been a learning process of learning the language.
Well, that's interesting. I remember I took an animal communication class at the Reiki retreat from Carolyn Musial many years ago, and I wanted to find out what was going on with my cat, because when I would leave for trips, my cat would let me know her displeasure by making a mess on my pillows and the luggage and so forth. And then when I came home, she would have defecated on my bed. So, I thought I've got to solve this. And I get my guidance back most clearly by hearing. So she
Oh,
told me that she was an old lady and she was kind of neurotic and she did not like to be left alone. And I just needed to stay home with her
okay.
and not travel for Reiki anymore. Well, that didn't work so well. Um,
Well, that's the thing is that sometimes with animal communication, what they have to say is not what you want to hear. And that, my horses were not, and I love it because the animals are very frank, and they're not trying to be mean, but they also don't try to do the politeness thing and whatever. They just say things like it is, or let you know like it is. And I was chuckling because you didn't even have to tell me cats often use that as a form of communication when they're trying to get a point across.
uh-huh.
And sometimes with animal communication, I can talk to them and say, oh, Karen would rather you didn't do that. But the thing to always remember is that they have free will. So they can say, well, I don't care what Karen wants. This is what I want. And so it's not going to stop.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, so cool. So, what I'm hearing is you can communicate or listen to your animals through hearing or images or feelings. Are there any other ways? And we'll get
Yeah.
to you in a second, Arturo.
Yeah, it's any of the intuitive styles. So sometimes people experience their intuition as thoughts. And so it may just sound like your own thought coming in, but it isn't necessarily. And that's where I learned to douse and just check, was that my thought or did my horse or my animal send it to me? I started to realize that whenever I was getting pictures of carrots, that was usually my horses.
Oh,
Were saying, bring me carrots.
okay.
Because I didn't often think of carrots just on my own.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Okay.
so there's all those different ways: clairsentient, clairvoyant, clairaudient, claircognizant, which is just clear knowing, and you don't know why you know, but you know. So there are all those ways that you might receive your information.
Okay. Arturo, you had a question?
Yeah, I want to know if is Reiki or some kind of training like Reiki or another technique has to be used or has to be learned before you can start communicating with animals, or any regular person from high school or from college one day wake up and he said, I want to talk with animals. I'm going to check some YouTube videos, and after some practice, boom, he can do it.
I think that Reiki isn't necessary, but I think it does help. It's been my experience in class. I teach both people that have already studied Reiki and people that have not. And I think, Arturo, what I've noticed is that you can still learn it, but the people without the Reiki experience people with Reiki experience are just a little more familiar with energy. So it does seem to be just a little easier for them, or a little more natural for them to pick it up. So I don't know if that helps. Anyone can learn it, but I've noticed in class that the people with the Reiki training do pick it up a little more quickly. And I've started using Reiki in my class. And the only thing I would caution about with the training is that I've actually seen, one of the things that we talk about a lot in class is just the rights of the animal, and also not projecting your own feelings and thoughts and beliefs on the animal. So we actually go into quite a bit of detail about that, because I have experienced some very incredible animal communicators who are absolutely picking up the things from the animals. But I've also experienced animal communicators who think they're picking up from the animals, but they're actually projecting their own thoughts and beliefs and ideas in. And so we do talk about how to distinguish and how to recognize when you're doing that, because that's really common.
Well, that
Yeah.
would be helpful to know about. Yeah, what all do you learn in an animal communication class?
Well, we have a specific agenda, and let me just try to think if I can cover a lot of it with you. But we do cover the how-tos and what's involved. We talk a lot about judgment because it doesn't belong in animal communication. It's really important to be an objective listener. And so we just talk about how to recognize if your own judgment is getting involved. And we talk about really difficult topics too, Karen, like death. That's a really common time when people contact me, when an animal is getting ready to cross over, and they want to know, are they doing the right thing? Are they understanding it correctly? And of course, there's a lot of grief and heartbreak in that. But the animals look at death completely differently than we do. So we kind of go into what their perspective is. And we talk about things like free will and what the animals like and don't like. We talk about the importance of permission and having permission not only from the animal. If you do not have the permission from the animal to talk to them, you don't talk to them. But you also don't talk to an animal if you don't have their caretaker's permission, because that animal, we talk about the divine contracts, the way that the animals that are in our lives, even if it's an animal like you ladies just picked up and saved his life, it sounds like, if I understood that correctly, they came into your life for a purpose, for a reason. And quite often, a lot of people, we have rescue dogs too, and it's tempting to think that the animal needs us, and they do, but we often need them just as much. And this is part of the divine contract. The animals are usually here to support us in our spiritual journeys, I guess, is the best way that I can put it. We talk about things like, for instance, in the animals' likes and dislikes. Animals don't, even rescue animals. I had a horse that I rescued once, and she just came from appalling conditions. And I could not look at her without feeling bad and thinking about the conditions that she came from. And I didn't realize that that was really hard on her, that I was doing that to her. She told the animal communicator that I hired, please tell her to stop doing that. I'm in a really good place now with lots of green grass and people who love me and pay attention to me. And I have lots of food now. And every time she looks at me, and I'm perfectly content to be here in the present, but every time she looks at me with all of that pity, she takes me back to when things weren't so great. And I don't want to keep going back to that. So there is quite a bit of storytelling in it, just different things that I've learned from the animals. Most of my training, once the connection was made, Karen, most of my training has been from the animals. So that rather than formal training. So.
Okay. So in the class, you learn, it kind of sounds like maybe how to set your personality and ego aside, and how to use different intuitive forms of discernment, maybe how to quiet your mind, and then how to tell if you're truly getting information or if you're projecting.
Yeah, you learn to
and then some practice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like,
wow. I need you as my publicist. That's, that's exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then do you practice talking to like whatever animals are around? Like you find some turtles or snakes or spiders hanging out?
Spiders are fun. Everybody, they are fun actually. They're very intelligent, and but everybody usually brings photos of their animals to class. And now that we're teaching online, I actually was guided to make my animal communication class online even before Reiki came online. So that was the very, as much as I was frightened of technology and resistant to technology, the animal communication class is the first class I taught online, and it went beautifully. But people bring photos, and they sometimes even just have the photos on their phone. And we actually wind up the class with 3 exercises. They talk to an animal that's living, that's in their life, and they don't have to have a photo, but they can have. They talk to an animal that's deceased, because animal communication crosses that barrier. And so you can very easily, with the same technique, talk to a deceased animal. And so people get an opportunity to practice that and see what that's like. And it's very similar to talking to a living animal, actually. And then we talk to each other's animals, so that people, because usually when you're talking to your own animals, you're thinking, well, yeah, I'm doing this, but I already know that about that animal, so I'm probably making it up. Because probably the most difficult thing with animal communication is getting out of the way, like getting yourself out of the way, and then it's having confidence in what you're hearing. But when I send them off into breakout rooms to talk to their partners' animals, everybody comes back just floored and blown away, because they all get all kinds of information, and their partner is able to verify it for them. So it's kind of exciting.
Well, that sounds exciting. I think Arturo had another question, and maybe someone else has a question too. Okay, go ahead.
My question is, at the end, the animals is another species, and there is a lot of different animals. So I was wondering if the same technique, I guess it could be used with the person that has autism, or the persons that are on coma, or some kind of disconnection from reality. So we can try to understand what's going on with them and then try to help them. Is that possible, you think so?
I think it might be. I've never tried with someone in a coma or anything like that, but I teach students on the autism spectrum. So that's a really great question, Arturo. I'm glad you asked it. And so one day I thought, oh, I wonder if this will work. And some of my children are nonverbal. And I thought, one day an animal communicator, another animal communicator who was a writing student, happened to be here with one of my nonverbal students, and the horse told her, the horse that Christopher always worked with, told her everything that Christopher was thinking and saying. And his mom was in tears, because there were things that she couldn't have possibly known. And but so I always thought, well, now I wonder if I can, from that I thought, okay, so she talked to the horse, and the horse gave her all this information that the horse and Christopher had been exchanging. And I thought, I wonder if I can connect with Christopher directly. So I tried it, and I didn't get anything at all. So I thought, no, I guess it doesn't work. Well, I always talk to my autistic students, because they understand everything. And when I follow a lot of Dr. Temple Grandin's work, and she's done a lot of work on the physiology of the brain. And the physiology of the autistic brain is very similar to the physiology of the horse's brain. And that's why we actually started teaching autistic kids, because I thought, well, the horses can probably help those kids more than other humans can. And in fact, that's what we've found to be the case. And so one day, another little student, and I have permission to tell this story, Molly, in fact, her grandmother encouraged me to tell it. It's just the sweetest little child, but definitely not nonverbal. She can make some sounds that have meaning, but that's about it. And I said to Molly, we were up for a ride, and I was riding with her, and it was a beautiful day. And I said, did you have a nice ride today, Molly? And Molly looked at me, and she was just looking intently at me. And I had just been telling her grandmother about how we have noticed that working with the horses seems to tend to open the language capability of a lot of our students on the autism spectrum. We noticed that their language would just flourish after they had spent some time with the horses. And so then I asked her if she'd had a good ride, and her grandmother said, Pam, look back. She's just looking at you so intently. And she was leaning forward and she was looking at me with a big smile on her face. And I thought, I wonder. So I opened up the channel the way that I would with an animal, and just this feeling flooded through me of just this absolute joy and contentment. And I just started describing it to her grandmother, and her grandmother got chills, and she said, oh my gosh, that sounds like just what she's trying to, like, just like the look on her face. And so it was lovely. And then it followed with, what do you mean Jasper, who's the horse she was riding, can help me talk? Horses don't talk. Like she thought that was the most foolish thing she had ever heard. And I just started laughing, and I said, you're absolutely right, Molly, horses don't talk, but for some reason, and I don't understand it, spending time with you guys, it does help you to talk, but I don't know why. so I think from that, I very clearly got communication from her. I think it's a lot like animals, though. I think, for instance, with an animal, if they're upset or if their minds are busy, you're not going to get through either. And also, if they don't want to talk to you, you're not going to get through. So I think probably Christopher either didn't know what I was doing or didn't want to talk to me, and Molly did. So I think that's why it went through that day.
That's interesting. You know, Arturo, when you asked that question, I was thinking about after I had practiced talking to my cat, then when my son passed away unexpectedly at age 22, I found I was very able to easily communicate with him and listen to him. And I had many conversations, and that helped me immensely with the grief process to realize that death is just another realm and that he is not gone. And I remember one time I walked by the refrigerator and looked at his picture and thought, you're dead, you're dead. And Audie immediately pops in and says, I resent that. He said, I feel more alive in spirit than I ever did in body.
Nice.
So, well, does anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see, Patricia, and then Lucy.
Pam, you mentioned that that you can now differentiate from when you think you are projecting what the animal is saying versus what the animal is really saying. Can you kind of give us a little bit of a clue?
Oh, no, it's not that I'm very good at it. It's that I douse it to double check. I everything that I receive, I verify. I teach people how to douse, typically with L rods, because they're really efficient and give you your answers, your responses quite quickly. So the way that I differentiate, Patricia, is by double checking. I double check everything. And it's interesting because my rods will tell me yes if so I always say,
so I'll actually holding the rods and then they say like, yes, that's right, or no, that's wrong.
Mm-hmm. So and so a lot of times I'll be having a conversation. Most of my sessions are distance on the phone because I just don't have time to go to people's places anymore. And so I'll have the rods with me and I'll say, so this is what I'm getting. And I'll get, no, like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, I didn't understand that properly. And I'll go into the picture and feeling, and I'll ask for the animal for clarity. Usually though nowadays, and I think it's just with practice and a lot of practice, I usually get a yes or a sort of. And so my rods won't go all the way to yes, they won't go all the way to no. they kind of go in between.
Mhm.
And
Kind of
yeah, like
so
that's
what's
exactly,
yes? Is this a
yes
yes?
for me is like pointing all the, you know what, let me just, this is video, so I just have some rods.
I know. These are not very good L rods.
What are the rods? Are they like specific tool or?
Yes.
Oh,
Those,
Yeah, it's a dowsing rod. And
so
Okay.
show us. Just make believe. That's so cool.
they're so
So
cool.
show us a
So
yes and a no and a
these
sort
are
of.
my yes. So my yes comes all the way in like this, and my no goes all the way out like that, because I'm a bit obtuse in that way. I won't mess it up. And I'm just going to ask the rods to show you my maybe or sort of kind of goes like this. So it doesn't, it's exactly what you said, Karen. It's in between. And when I get a maybe or sort of, then I teach my students too, then you break the question down and you say, which part of it didn't I understand and which part of it did I understand? And so then you ask for clarity, and usually you can just kind of get to the answer after a bit with that. So yeah.
So after you get the answer, is that when you go in to do your Reiki? I mean, do you use those to, to ask the animal if it's okay and what's wrong, or what is your process sort of?
So I find that I can get yeses and nos with this, which is nice. And really, if an animal will agree to talk to these, you can learn a lot with yes or no. But with what I do, I want more detail than that, and I'd like to get some of the subtleties of the conversation and of what the animal wants and needs. So I actually do the full communication and get the subtleties, and then I just verify, did I understand that correctly? Did I explain that to your person the way you wanted me to? And if I get a yes, then I just keep going. And a lot of times the person on the other end of the phone, they may or may not be aware, depending on whether we've talked about it, that I'm verifying everything. But I really like to do that to just make sure, because sometimes you kind of get the gist of things, but you don't get it exactly. And the Reiki also, Patricia, is another thing that helps me be a clearer channel so that I don't project as much. And I don't, and Reiki's helped me work a lot on judgment, which I needed a lot of work for me. And so that's helped me not to project as well.
Okay. Well, Christine, I see you, and Lucy, you were next. What's your question? You've got to unmute.
Thank you. I have a 16-month-old Boston Terrier. Her name is Gracie. She's very sweet, and this is her picture here.
Oh,
she's
cute.
oh,
You got to hold it up. Up.
a little higher, a little higher. There you are.
Okay, now we can see her.
Isn't she adorable?
Wait, my question is, there are most of the time, she stares at me for really long periods of time. And if I'm in the kitchen, she'll just go back and forth. But she just looks at me very, very intently. And I share her with my husband, so she has both of us. And she takes to us in different ways, where he's more of the male, side. So he's a little more rougher when he plays, while I'm a little more feminine.
Yeah.
That's my question.
Well, do you also do Reiki, Lucy, by any chance?
I do, yes. I Reiki on her. Yeah.
I thought so. I could get a sense of that. And I'm not actually communicating with her directly, just because I'd need to go through the permissions. But what I'm getting an impression of is that, or what I'd like to share with you, is that they can see energy. And so sometimes people will say to me, my cat is so dumb, it just sits and stares at the wall. And I'm like, that's not dumb. They're seeing something that's there that you can't see. They're not dumb at all. And so I just get a sense, and certainly you could douse it to check if I'm right, or you could ask her yourself and see what impression that you get. But I get a sense that she's probably looking at all the beautiful energy around you.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah. And they will do that. they'll focus on energy that we can't see, and it's lovely.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I appreciate
You're welcome.
Okay, Christina.
Okay, my question is, do you prepare the same way for a Reiki session with a horse or with a dog as you would with people?
Yeah, actually, I prepare in a lot the same way. You know, just invoking my symbols, and it's almost identical. One of the things, though, that I've noticed with Reiki sessions with animals is animals don't take very long. And so where you might do a 40 or 50-minute session with a human, you might do 5 or 10 minutes with an animal, and they'll say, great, I've got it, I'm done. And we noticed with the animal Reiki, when that came through, it's actually a different energy. And there's an efficiency to it that the animals really seem to appreciate. But otherwise, yes, I would have to say, Christine, I do prepare in exactly the same way. And I do ask, probably the one thing that's different is that I ask the animal permission, whereas with a human, they're automatically giving me permission. A lot of times with the animal, it's their caretaker that wants me there for Reiki. And I say, you know, I'll come, or I'll do a distance session with your animal, but I have to double check with them. And if they say no, it's no. And everybody understands that.
Well, I don't have like a dog or something, but my neighbor's dog, they come actually running up my drive. We live in the country. And so they coming running up the driveway, and they want me to do Reiki. They fled right over me and are with me on the ground, and both of them, it's like two sisters, and one is the older and she wants first, and then comes the other, and she's also the second one, is also the one who takes my hand and puts it with her nose wherever she needs it. And she has also horses. And so I had Reiki'd one of her horses when he had a colic, and she said, Christina, long distance. And so I did right away long distance, and it helped. And then when I came over there the next time, he was right, he came, and I guess he saw, and I just activated my, and then I went there, and here he comes right in, and I have respect for horses. So he came right in front of my face, right there, and he smelled, I just sniffled. He sniffled up, he sniffled down, and he liked it. He was very soft and in my face, and I was like, he's like, well, thank you. I think I felt you the other day. It's like, yeah, I'm blown away by this, so I was wondering.
It's really neat. And if you are interested, Christina, or any of you, I've written quite a few articles about Reiki with animals, and I wrote them before animal Reiki existed. So I wrote them when I was using just my regular Reiki that I use with humans, Usui Reiki, and then Karuna, and then Holy Fire. I wrote them from that perspective. And on our website, I do have an ebook, and I've got also all of the articles about just different things that we've noticed with sharing Reiki with animals. So do go ahead and check that out. It's a little hard to find. I will redo my website, but it's just a small little word on the front page, our newsroom. And if you click on that, it takes you to all of it.
And that is on that Reiki from the Farm?
Yes, okay. That's the podcast.
So tell us the name of your website.
So if you're yes, my website is Reiki. Yeah, ReikiFromTheFarm.com, and also HiddenBrookFarm.ca.
Hidden.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that something, Karen, that I can send you a link and you can share in the
chat?
I can send it to you. Oh, I can put it in the chat. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Reiki from the farm.com? .ca?
Yeah. Reiki from the farm.com. Yes.
Okay, there it is. Well, one thing that you said that I wanted to point out is, there's different animal Reiki classes that you can take. The class that Pam co-authored with Colleen Benelli and a couple of other people is specifically incorporating the Holy Fire Reiki, and it's originating a new special Reiki energy that works with animals and the divine animal kingdom. So I took that class and I thought it was an amazing, marvelous class, and I had a lot of fun, and I got to work on other people's cats and dogs, and then to work with some animals on a webcam. So I thought that was the cat's meow.
Yep.
So yes, you could either take animal Reiki or animal communication, or both. And when do you have an animal communication class coming up?
My next animal communication class is November 22nd, and I have another one in February and the following May. And I actually have an animal Reiki class coming up next Monday and Tuesday, and again in February and again in May. So
Okay.
again in December. Sorry, December also in February. And
Okay. Does anybody else have a question?
yeah.
Okay, Patricia. Can you unmute?
I think Marilyn had a question, but just real quick, Pam, are you ever fearful of any of the animals? I know that as a young child, I was almost bit in the face, and I have a little bit of, you know, it takes a while to warm up. So I'm just curious, as a practitioner, if you ever are fearful of
Yeah.
animals.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, that's a really good question. I forgot to mention that that's something we spend some time on in class too, is safety, because I was bitten in the face when I wasn't careful enough. And I actually pierced my eyebrow and top part of my eye and the bottom of my cheek, but fortunately completely missed my eye. And it was just a real rookie mistake when I was just learning. I thought, well, yeah, but I'm a Reiki master and an animal communicator, and I'm trying to help. But I was trying to help a dog that I knew had a problem with this. And I really should have been much more cautious. I should have taken the precautions. I didn't blame the animal at all. And to be fair, I wasn't listening to the animal. The animal was trying to explain to me that there was a defect in its brain and it wanted to be put down. And it's really important when they ask you for things like that, that you respect and honor what they're saying. And I did share with their people, but then I said, but maybe we can do Reiki, maybe we can help the animal. That wasn't what the animal wanted. And it tried to explain to me that it wasn't in control when it did that. And then when it would come back into control, it hated that it did that. She hated that she did that. And so I actually was bit in the face. So we do talk quite a bit about safety and just always making sure when you can do all of this work from a distance. And so you never have to be in an animal's space in order to be effective with the communication or the Reiki. And in the animal Reiki class, we talk quite a lot about safety as well. Because sometimes too, when an animal, you can have a very safe animal who, when they are receiving Reiki, gets a little unbalanced or gets unsteady or upset. So it's really important too. But so that's a great question.
Okay, Marilyn, you had a question next. We cannot hear you. You've got to get a lot closer.
There you are. There you are.
Hello. My question is,
Hi.
I'm curious about, in our case, we help rescue and foster cats and dogs. And so we have right now 3 dogs and 6 cats, and that we've committed to. But my question is, when you read for a family of animals, do you have to know them all specifically or be told their names, or do you sometimes get a feeling for 1 or 2 that really want to speak or have something to say?
That's a great question too, and it's a bit of both. So I have a wonderful friend and student like you guys who has 23 cats that she's rescued. And in fact, she bought a new house for half of the cats so that she could bring the one. And she and her husband are very committed to these cats. And she wanted to know a little bit about each. So we went down, I just got names, and usually it helps me to have a picture. With her, we just tried with names because that was just too many cats for her to get pictures of. She got pictures of a few that were having difficulties, but the rest she would just use the name and I would check and get a little bit of information for each. So we did it that way. But a lot of times you, when you do have a group of animals, sometimes there will be a spokesperson. And they, for instance, there's a group that rescues feral cats. So they don't rescue them, sorry. They take in feral cats, they neuter, spay, treat them for mites and fleas. And then as long as there's somebody that's willing to feed the colony, they'll release them back into their feral colonies. But that way they're not going to have population explosions and that sort of thing. So they had 90 cats that they had collected that were all being neutered and spayed. And this is where I love the science. They discovered that they actually had my teacher as an animal communicator, and one time they had this big clinic. They were neutering and spaying 90 cats the next day, and they forgot to hire my teacher, and she wasn't available. And they said, help, can you come and help? I said, absolutely. So in that instance, I would go into a room with a couple of the rooms were like 15 or 20 cats, and some of the rooms had 40 and 50 cats, and or one of the rooms, one main room. And usually each room that I would go into, one cat would talk on behalf of all of the rest. So that happens too, that you'll get like a spokesperson sometimes that will talk. So it's a little bit of both.
That is interesting.
Fascinating.
It was cool. And what they discovered, the science behind it, is what they discovered is that when they did not have an animal communicator, they sometimes lost cats. And also the operations wouldn't go as smoothly and the recoveries wouldn't go as smoothly. But when they had an animal communicator, because half of the staff was all for having an animal communicator and half of the staff thought it was malarkey. And that's okay. But they statistically, they noticed that these clinics went significantly better when they had an animal communicator. And so they always tried to make sure that they did. And when you can just let the cats know that nobody's trying to harm them because they believe, they don't know, they've been trapped, they've been brought to this place. But when you can explain it all out to them, most of them say, I'll be honest with you, most of them say, no fleas, where do I sign up? And so
well, what about when they're being spayed and neutered? What do they say about that?
As long as it's going to get rid of the fleas, they feel that it's worthwhile. So at least that's that group that I talked to. Most of them, when I got to the part of, and so this is what they're doing. And I usually explained, like, the spays and neuters are so that your colony will not get so large that you're competing for food and having illness and difficulty. And most of them are like, yeah, but I have to admit there was one group that was recent mothers that they had been waiting to hold this clinic to when their kittens could be weaned. And that group was like, yeah, we really, do you know how there's some women that are just like amazing mothers and they have 9 kids because they love being mothers and they're just so good at it. Some cats are like that too. And they were just like, yeah, I know you're trying to do well for us, but we really like having babies. So we're going to miss that. But so they weren't 100%, but they really did understand where the people were coming from.
That's neat. And that leads me to my other question is that, you know, some cats are just so happy to have a home that have been rescued and they don't want to go out. And we have, most of our cats are like that, but we have this one cat that wants to go out and hunt or explore. And it drives us crazy because I'm real sensitive to him and I just know he wants out so badly. But the other day, he stayed out all night. So it was really scary, you know, that. And I'm just wondering, have you communicated with many cats about this issue? Like they want to go out, but the owner knows it's a little dangerous out there. And do cats really understand that, or do they just have, is the instinct so strong that they'd rather go out and risk death and
You know,
no?
yeah, they're a lot like people. Some of them, they have free will and they all have their own unique personalities. So that's why I always say, you know, I've talked to animals, for instance, in zoos and animals that are in public places like that. And there's all kinds of people who say, that's, you know, you should put them in the wild and da 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 da. I talked to a dolphin at SeaWorld once and she says, do you know the wild's overrated? She says, do you know what it's like to look over your shoulder for sharks all the time? I love it here. I don't want to live anywhere else. And, you know, and at the same time, I know that there were people lobbying to get those dolphins set loose, and they were telling me like, oh my gosh, we love our trainers and we love what we do and we love the people and the love we feel from the people. So they're all individual, and so some cats are just like, you know, I know that's what they want and I get why they want it, but it's not what I want. And other cats are kind of go, well, I can see their point. So, okay, what if we, and sometimes cats are really neat because they'll sometimes suggest compromises. And, yeah, so they all have their own personalities and some, like you said, some are perfectly content, but some, you know, there's an exercise that came through. I had a horse that kept breaking the fences to go and see my neighbor's horse to see if they could have a baby together, a female horse. And I had all the babies that I have 12 horses, and that's a really lot of hay and very expensive to feed. And I said, 12 is really enough for me. She had broken the fence and had a baby 2 years before. But I said, really, one baby of yours, because I can't let them go. They're going to stay here forever. And so that brought through a really beautiful exercise that I believe is going to show up in the Animal Reiki Masterclass, when that's not quite ready yet, but when it is ready, on healing disharmony. And that exact situation of an indoor cat, that people really need it to be an indoor cat for a variety of reasons, but it doesn't want to be. And so we're hopeful that that's going to help in situations like that.
Okay, we'll take one last question and then we've got to end. All right, Arturo.
I got a question. I'm wondering, hopefully not happen to anybody, but there is a possibility with this situation and with people very protective of his homes or police cops, the dogs basically. When a dog attacks you and is training to attack you, what is the best way to try to avoid besides not run, because he's gonna catch you anyway? I was wondering if there is some kind of tip or technique, or try to talk to the dog even if you don't take the training for animal communication. Because at the end, the instinct of the dog on that situation is, I will say, the physical, mental instinct that he was training to do, which is attack. But if with energy, I wonder it should be more powerful. But what do you recommend that to do if the situation show up?
Gosh, I have to be honest with you, Arturo, that I've never thought of that before. So I'm not really sure. I think that you are right. I've seen the instinct of animals take over, and not in that situation, but I work with horses and instincts take over for them quite often in different situations. The only thing that I can speak to perhaps is things like that, or I've never been on the receiving end of an attack dog. I've been on a receiving end of a dog that didn't like me very much and was maybe growling. And in that instance, I just try to communicate, I'm not here to harm you. And if I hear I don't care, it's like, well, okay, but I'm leaving. So can I leave now, please? And again, the animal gets to choose whether I do get to leave or whether I get in trouble. So far, I've been very fortunate, and I have come across wild animals who is particularly, Karen, I don't know if you've noticed this, but our other senior licensed teacher, Carolyn Musial, who's also an animal communicator, noticed, and I've noticed it too, since animal Reiki, the wild animals seem very drawn to us and not afraid of us. And that was an unexpected thing. So I'm sorry, I don't know if
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know they've been so highly trained that once their master tells them to do something, they typically do it. So
Yeah. I know I was laying in the hammock this weekend and all of a sudden a cat appeared out of nowhere. I don't know whose cat it is. I've never seen it. And it kept pawing at the hammock. And the next thing I knew, it was sitting in my lap. And like, wow, that was interesting. So
it really is. They love it, Karen.
Yeah.
They love the energy.
Well, let's go over one last time how to contact you and your website and so forth.
Yeah, it's probably the best way is through my website, www.hiddenbrook.ca or reikifromthefarm.com. And also for if you do like podcasts, even though it's not only about animal Reiki, it's about all kinds of Reiki topics, you might like to check out the podcast Reiki from the Farm. It's on all the major podcast carriers. And for the classes, there's a calendar on my website, and you can just have a look through the calendar if there's anything you'd like to follow up with. So thank you so much, all of you guys, for showing up, and thank you. Yeah, and thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you. That's awesome. We appreciate your tips and info, and
you're welcome.
This is so fun.
Even it looks from another world.
What's that?
Look.
It looks from another world. Communication with animals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you all for joining. You know, this podcast is normally the third Monday of the month. And if there's another topic you would like to know about, let me know, because I have access to a whole bunch of licensed teachers who are my friends. They know about a lot of things. So yeah, thank you all so much. And KarenHarrison.net is my website.